At Christmas dinner, I sat quietly eating Mom's famous apple pie when I heard my sister Sarah whispering to my cousin Jake about their New Year's plan. They wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone at the family party. Mom was in on it too, nodding along as they discussed how they'd reveal my embarrassing secret to the whole extended family. My heart sank as I realized my own blood relatives were plotting against me. I excused myself to the bathroom, my mind racing with hurt and betrayal. I returned from the bathroom with shaking hands, forcing a smile as I sat back down at the dining table. The conversation had shifted to Uncle Frank's new fishing boat, but I could see Sarah's knowing glances toward Jake. I picked at my second slice of pie, pretending to listen to Dad's story about his latest golf game while straining to catch any whispered words between the conspirators. 20 minutes later, when Mom got up to start clearing dishes, I saw my opportunity. Sarah and Jake had moved to the living room couch, speaking in hushed tones while the rest of the family remained scattered between the kitchen and dining room. I positioned myself near the hallway entrance, close enough to hear but hidden behind the large Christmas tree Wed decorated just 2 weeks ago. "Did you bring the copies?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the clinking of dishes from the kitchen. Jake nodded, patting his jacket pocket. "Everything's here. The therapy notes, the hospital records from when he had those panic attacks, even the letter from his old boss explaining why they really let him go." My blood turned to ice. They were talking about the darkest period of my life. 2 years ago, when I'd lost my job at Peterson & Associates. I'd been forced to move back home at 28 years old, spending 3 months sleeping in my childhood bedroom, while battling anxiety so severe I couldn't leave the house some days. The therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had been my lifeline during that time, helping me work through the depression and panic attacks that followed my termination from the accounting firm. "Mom's been saving all this stuff for years," Sarah continued with a cruel laugh. "She found his therapy files when she was organizing the basement last month. Apparently, he wrote about feeling like a failure, how Emma dumping him made him feel worthless, all that pathetic stuff." I gripped the doorframe, fighting the urge to storm into the room and confront them immediately. Emma, my ex-girlfriend who'd broken up with me via text message during my lowest point, claiming she couldn't handle my negativity. The memory still stung, even though I'd moved on and built a successful career at Brennan Marketing Solutions downtown. "The best part," Jake whispered excitedly, "is that we're going to frame it as family concern, like we're worried about his mental health and think everyone should know the truth about why he never visits anymore." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "He thinks he's so much better than us now with his fancy apartment downtown and his marketing job. Time to remind him where he came from and what he really is underneath all that success." Mom's voice drifted from the kitchen as she directed Aunt Helen on where to store the leftover turkey. I realized she was deliberately staying busy to give Sarah and Jake privacy to finalize their plans. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd ever imagined possible. My own mother, the woman who'd held me during those terrible panic attacks, was now planning to weaponize my vulnerability against me. "Did you confirm that Emma's coming to the New Year's party?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, she's excited to see him get what's coming to him. She's prepared to share some stories about his behavior during their relationship too. The crying, the mood swings, how he became clingy and desperate." I closed my eyes, remembering how Emma had twisted every moment of genuine emotion I'd shared with her into something shameful. During our 2-year relationship, Shed encouraged me to open up about my feelings, only to later use those same vulnerabilities as weapons when she wanted to end things. "Uncle Frank and Aunt Helen will finally see past his act," Sarah continued. "They always praise him for getting his life together, but they don't know about the medication he was taking or how he couldn't even handle a simple job interview without having a breakdown. That wasn't even accurate. I'd struggled with exactly 3 job interviews during my recovery period, and Dr. Martinez had helped me develop coping strategies that proved incredibly effective. The position at Brennan Marketing had come after one of the most confident interviews of my career." Jake pulled out his phone. "I've got pictures of some of the therapy notes. Listen to this entry. I feel like I'm drowning and nobody understands what I'm going through. Sometimes I wonder if my family would be better off without me around to disappoint them constantly." Hearing my own words from that dark period read aloud like entertainment made my stomach lurch. I'd written that during week 4 of therapy, when the weight of unemployment and family criticism had nearly crushed my spirit entirely, Dr. Martinez had helped me understand that those feelings were temporary and treatable, not permanent character flaws. "Oh, and here's another good one," Jake continued with obvious glee. I can't stop thinking about how pathetic I must look to everyone. I'm a grown man living with his parents, unable to support himself, watching his girlfriend lose respect for him day by day. Maybe Emma's right that I'm too negative and broken to be in a relationship. Sarah clapped her hands together softly. Perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing that will show everyone he's still the same unstable mess he's always been, just hiding it better now. The casual cruelty in their voices made me realize this wasn't a spontaneous decision driven by holiday stress. This was calculated, premeditated emotional warfare, designed to destroy the progress I'd worked so hard to achieve. They wanted to drag me back down to their level, to prove that my independence and success were somehow threatening to their family dynamic. I heard footsteps approaching from the kitchen and quickly moved back toward the dining room, grabbing my water glass and taking a long drink to calm my racing heart. Dad emerged from the hallway carrying a stack of dessert plates, completely unaware of the conversation I'd just overheard. "Rudolph, you're being awfully quiet tonight," he observed, setting the plates on the sideboard. "Everything okay with work?" "Everything's great, Dad. Just thinking about the New Year's party next week. Should be interesting." Sarah appeared in the doorway at that moment, her face flushed with what I now recognized as anticipation rather than holiday cheer. "Oh, it's going to be very interesting," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think this might be our most memorable family gathering yet." I forced myself to smile back, my mind already beginning to formulate a response to their planned attack. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I left dinner early that evening, claiming I had client reports to finish before the holiday weekend ended. The 30-minute drive back to my downtown apartment gave me time to process the magnitude of their betrayal, but also to remember exactly how far I'd traveled from that broken person they wanted to resurrect for their entertainment. Pulling into the parking garage beneath my building, I thought about the last time I'd driven this route in the opposite direction 2 years ago. Back then, I'd been heading toward my childhood home with 3 boxes of belongings and a spirit so crushed I could barely function. Peterson and Associates had eliminated my position during their corporate restructuring, and despite having worked there for 4 years with stellar performance reviews, I'd been among the first wave of layoffs. The panic attacks started during my second week of unemployment. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with my heart racing, convinced I was having a heart attack. The first time it happened, Mom actually drove me to the emergency room where a patient doctor explained that anxiety could manifest with physical symptoms just as severe as any medical condition. Emma hadn't understood. During our final weeks together, she'd grown increasingly frustrated with what she called my constant negativity and inability to just move on. When I'd tried to explain that depression wasn't something I could simply will away, she'd accused me of making excuses and wallowing in self-pity. The text message that ended our relationship came on a Tuesday morning in March, 2 months after I'd lost my job. "I can't do this anymore, Rudolph. You're not the person I fell in love with. You're negative all the time and I feel like I'm drowning with you. I need space to figure out what I want. And right now that doesn't include being around someone who's given up on life." I'd read that message while sitting in my car outside Dr. Martinez's office, preparing for my weekly therapy session. Instead of driving home to hide under my blankets like I would have a month earlier, I'd walked into that appointment and used Emma's words as a starting point for one of the most productive conversations Dr. Martinez and I ever had. "She's right that you're not the same person she fell in love with," Dr. Martinez had said, leaning back in his worn leather chair. "The question is, do you want to be that person again? Or do you want to become someone better?" That session marked the turning point in my recovery. Instead of trying to return to my old life, I'd started building a new one. I'd updated my resume, highlighting skills I'd never bothered to showcase before. I'd started exercising regularly, not to lose weight but to manage the anxiety that threatened to overwhelm me during job searches. Most importantly, I'd begun setting boundaries with people who treated my struggle as an inconvenience rather than a legitimate health challenge. Moving back home had been a practical necessity, but it had also exposed the toxic dynamics I'd learned to accept as normal. Mom's constant reminders of my failures, disguised as concern. Sarah's passive-aggressive comments about my inability to handle adult responsibilities. Dad's uncomfortable silence whenever my mental health was mentioned, as if depression was something shameful that reflected poorly on his parenting. The apartment I now called home represented everything they couldn't understand or control. 800 square feet of space where I could exist without judgment, where my bookshelves held self-help titles and business strategy guides, instead of hiding them from family ridicule. The kitchen where Id learned to cook healthy meals instead of stress eating, mom's heavy comfort food. The home office where Id built a reputation at Brennan Marketing for creative campaigns and reliable results. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen island, looking out at the city lights below. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Sarah and 2 text messages asking if I was feeling okay and reminding me about the New Year's party preparations. The fake concern in her words made my skin crawl now that I understood her true intentions. Opening my laptop, I began researching something Id never considered before: the legal implications of sharing someone's private medical information without consent. What I discovered made my jaw drop. In our state, disclosing therapy records or mental health treatment details without permission could constitute harassment, especially if done with intent to harm someone's reputation or emotional well-being. I thought about Dr. Martinez's advice during our final regular session 6 months ago. Recovery isn't just about getting better, Rudolph. It's about protecting the progress you've made and refusing to let toxic people drag you backward. Sometimes that means making difficult choices about relationships, even family relationships. At the time, Id nodded politely while secretly believing he was being overly dramatic. Family was family, regardless of their flaws. But sitting in my kitchen that night, finally understanding the depth of their resentment toward my independence and success, I realized Dr. Martinez had been preparing me for exactly this moment. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found David Chen, my law school roommate who now practiced family law in the next county. We'd maintained a friendship through occasional dinners and holiday cards, though we hadn't spoken in several months. Our last conversation had been about his divorce proceedings, during which Head mentioned how often family members used personal information as weapons against each other. It was nearly 10 o'clock, but David was known for working late. I sent him a text message. "Hey David, hypothetical question about privacy laws and family disputes. Do you have time for a quick call this week? Nothing urgent, just curious about some legal boundaries." His response came within minutes. Hypothetical family questions are usually the most serious ones. "Can we talk tomorrow evening? I'm in court all day but free after 6. I confirmed the appointment and closed my laptop, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me for the first time since overhearing their conversation. Sarah, Jake, and Mom had spent weeks planning my public humiliation, believing they held all the power in our family dynamic. They had no idea that their intended victim had spent 2 years building the exact skills and support network needed to defend himself against their psychological warfare. Walking to my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The person looking back bore little resemblance to the broken man who'd moved out of his childhood bedroom 6 months ago. This person had clear eyes, straight shoulders, and the quiet confidence that came from surviving the worst period of his life and emerging stronger. Tomorrow, I'd begin planning my response to their planned attack. Tonight, I'd sleep peacefully in my own space, surrounded by the life I'd built through determination and professional help rather than family approval. They wanted to remind everyone who I used to be. Instead, I'd show them exactly who I'd become. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm and immediately called Dr. Martinez's office to request an emergency session. His receptionist managed to squeeze me in during his lunch break, and by 12:30, I was sitting in his familiar office, explaining the situation I'd discovered the night before. Dr. Martinez listened without interruption as I described overhearing the family's plan, their access to my private therapy records, and their intention to weaponize my recovery process against me. When I finished, he leaned forward with the serious expression I remembered from our early sessions together. "Rudolph, what they're planning constitutes emotional abuse and a significant violation of your privacy. The fact that they've obtained and plan to share your therapy notes without consent crosses multiple legal and ethical boundaries." Hearing a mental health professional validate my perception of the situation lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For a moment, I'd wondered if I was overreacting or being too sensitive about their planned family concern intervention. The question now, Dr. Martinez continued, is how you want to respond. You have several options, ranging from direct confrontation to legal action to strategic disengagement from the family dynamic entirely. I explained my plan to consult with David Chen about the legal implications, which Dr. Martinez endorsed enthusiastically. Knowledge of your rights and options will help you make an informed decision rather than reacting emotionally in the moment. That evening, David and I met at a quiet restaurant, halfway between our cities. Over dinner, I outlined the situation while he took notes on his phone, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timeline and specific details. What they're planning is legally problematic on several levels, he said finally, setting down his fork. Medical privacy laws protect therapy records specifically, and using them to harm someone's reputation could constitute harassment or even defamation if they make false claims about your current mental state. David explained that I could potentially file for a restraining order based on their plans for public humiliation, or pursue civil action for invasion of privacy. However, he suggested a different approach that might prove more satisfying. Family law has taught me that sometimes the most effective response to psychological manipulation is exposing the manipulator's own behavior. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, if you know what I mean. He was right. During my months of therapy and recovery, I'd become acutely aware of the family dynamics that had contributed to my struggles. Sarah's drinking problem, that she hid from everyone except immediate family. Mom's inappropriate relationship with our married neighbor. Jake's financial troubles that Head never mentioned to Uncle Frank, despite working in his business. If they want to air family secrets, David continued, maybe they should be prepared for the same treatment. The key is making sure you have documentation and evidence rather than just accusations. We spent the next hour strategizing approaches that would protect me legally while potentially turning their own tactics against them. David offered to help me document everything properly, ensuring that any response I chose would be both legally sound and personally satisfying. Driving home that night, I felt the same focused energy I'd experienced during my job search at Brennan Marketing. This wasn't about revenge. Exactly. It was about refusing to be a victim and demonstrating that the person they wanted to humiliate no longer existed. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into research with the same intensity I'd once applied to marketing campaigns. I contacted my former therapist's office to confirm that sharing my records without consent was indeed illegal, and to request documentation of that fact. I researched Sarah's DUI arrest from the previous year, which Shed managed to keep secret from most of the family by using a lawyer Dad had recommended. The most interesting discovery came when I decided to investigate Jake's financial situation more thoroughly. His social media posts showed an expensive lifestyle that seemed incompatible with his salary at Uncle Frank's small construction business. Designer clothes, frequent restaurant meals, weekend trips to Atlantic City. Either Jake had a secret income source, or he was living far beyond his means. A little more digging revealed that Uncle Frank's business had experienced some unexpected cash flow problems over the past 6 months. Nothing dramatic enough to threaten the company, but enough to make Frank mention it during family dinners. Jake, who managed the books and handled client payments, had access to every account and transaction. I didn't have proof of wrongdoing, but I had enough questions to warrant a careful examination of the books. More importantly, I had enough information to make Jake very uncomfortable if he decided to participate in my public humiliation. 3 days before New Year's Eve, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of confronting them or trying to prevent their plan, I would let them proceed exactly as intended. The only difference would be my response, which they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late to change course. I called Sarah to confirm my attendance at the party, even expressing enthusiasm about seeing extended family members I hadn't visited with in several months. I asked about Emma's invitation with just the right amount of curiosity, mentioning that I'd love to catch up with her about her new job in pharmaceutical sales. "Oh, you'll definitely get to catch up," Sarah said with barely concealed excitement. "I think this New Year's party might be really memorable for everyone." "I hope so," I replied truthfully. "I'm actually planning to bring a special gift for the family. Something I think will really surprise everyone." The irony wasn't lost on me. They were planning to surprise me with public humiliation, while I was planning to surprise them with consequences they'd never considered. The difference was that my surprise would be based on truth and documentation, rather than stolen medical records and cruel intentions. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was actually looking forward to New Year's Eve for the first time in years. 3 days before New Year's Eve, my phone rang while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my office downtown. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with genuine warmth, knowing exactly why she was calling. "Hey, Rudolph. I just wanted to make sure you're still planning to come to the party on Saturday. Mom's been cooking for days, and she's so excited to see you." The fake sweetness in her voice made my stomach turn, but I matched her tone perfectly. "Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it. I've been looking forward to it all week. Great. And you remember that Emma's coming too, right? She specifically asked about you when I invited her. I think she really wants to reconnect. I paused for exactly the right amount of time, as if considering this unexpected news. Really? That's interesting. I'd love to catch up with her. How's she doing these days? Oh, she's doing amazing. Got promoted to senior sales rep at that pharmaceutical company, bought a new car, seems really confident and happy. She mentioned how much she's grown since you two dated. The implication was clear. Emma had thrived after leaving me, while Id presumably remained stuck in the same patterns that had driven her away. Sarah was fishing for signs of insecurity or lingering attachment that they could exploit during the party. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. I'm really happy things worked out well for her. It'll be nice to hear about her success firsthand. I could practically hear Sarah's frustration through the phone. My genuine reaction wasn't providing the emotional vulnerability she'd hoped to uncover. So, how are you doing, really? She pressed. I know the holidays can be difficult, especially with everything that happened a couple years ago. Mom worries about you living alone downtown, working such long hours. There it was. The setup for their planned intervention. They needed me to express some current struggle or concern that would justify their public sharing of my private medical information. Actually, I'm doing better than I have in years, I replied honestly. The job at Brennan Marketing has been incredible, and I love having my own space. Dr. Martinez always said that independence and professional success would be good markers of recovery progress. Mentioning Dr. Martinez was a calculated risk, but I wanted to establish that I was still in contact with my therapist. If they planned to question my current mental health, I wanted it known that I had professional support readily available. Oh, you're still seeing Dr. Martinez? Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Not regularly anymore, but I check in with him every few months. He's been really proud of how far I've come since those difficult months 2 years ago. I was establishing the narrative that my therapy experience had been positive and successful, making it harder for them to frame it as evidence of ongoing instability. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Jake, and I noticed Head called my number by mistake when he meant to call someone else. Instead of hanging up, I listened as he spoke to whoever answered his intended call. Yeah, she's got him completely fooled, Jake was saying. He has no idea what's coming on Saturday. Sarah says he sounded almost happy about seeing Emma again, which is perfect. The more confident he acts, the better this is going to work. There was a pause as the other person responded. No. We're going to wait until after dinner when everyone's had a few drinks. Mom's prepared this whole speech about family transparency and supporting troubled relatives. She's even got some psychology articles printed out about enabling versus tough love. My blood boiled at the image of Mom researching ways to justify their planned humiliation, but I forced myself to keep listening. The best part is we're going to record the whole thing. Emma suggested we could make it into one of those viral videos about family interventions gone wrong. She thinks his reaction will be hilarious. They were planning to broadcast my humiliation on social media for entertainment. The cruelty was breathtaking, even by their standards. Jake, you're going to love this, the voice continued. Sarah found his old college rejection letters in Mom's basement too. Apparently he applied to graduate school twice and got rejected both times. We're going to work that into the narrative about him being a perpetual failure who just covers it up better now. That information was completely false. He'd been accepted to 3 graduate programs but had chosen to pursue work experience instead. But facts had never mattered much to my family when they conflicted with their preferred narrative about my limitations. Don't forget to bring the stuff about his medication, Jake added. Emma says that's the most embarrassing part, how he needed antidepressants just to function like a normal person. I'd taken medication for 4 months during my recovery, under Dr. Martinez's supervision, and had tapered off successfully when we determined I no longer needed pharmaceutical support. It had been a responsible medical decision that had helped me stabilize during a crisis period. They were planning to present it as evidence of fundamental weakness. The call ended, and I sat in my office chair, staring out at the city skyline while processing everything I'd just heard. They weren't just planning to embarrass me. They were planning to create a false narrative about my character, my history, and my current mental state, then broadcast it to our extended family and potentially to social media. This went far beyond typical family dysfunction. This was a coordinated attack designed to destroy the reputation and relationships I'd worked years to build. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything ID learned, including timestamps and exact quotes from the conversations ID overheard. David had emphasized the importance of detailed records if legal action became necessary. But as I typed, I realized legal action wasn't what I wanted. I wanted them to experience the same shock, embarrassment, and betrayal they were planning to inflict on me. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to have their secrets exposed to people whose opinions they valued. Most importantly, I wanted the extended family members who would witness this planned humiliation to see exactly who was really unstable and cruel in our family dynamic. By the time I finished documenting everything, I had a plan that would give them exactly the kind of memorable New Year's Eve they were hoping for. New Year's Eve arrived with unusually warm weather for December in our part of Pennsylvania. I spent the morning at my apartment, carefully preparing the gift ID promised to bring to the family gathering. The beautifully wrapped box sat on my kitchen counter, containing documents and evidence ID collected over the past week. I arrived at my parents' house at 4 o'clock, 2 hours before the official party start time. Mom was in the kitchen, wearing her best dress and the nervous energy she always displayed when hosting extended family. "Rudolph, sweetheart, you're early," she said, embracing me with what felt like genuine warmth. For a moment, I almost doubted what Id overheard, until I noticed her eyes scanning my face for signs of stress or vulnerability. "I wanted to help with setup," I said, setting my wrapped gift on the side table in the living room. "Plus, I brought something special for the family to open together later tonight." Mom's eyes lingered on the box with obvious curiosity, but she didn't ask what was inside. "That's thoughtful, honey. Your father's setting up chairs in the basement, and Sarah should be here soon with the appetizers." Over the next 2 hours, relatives arrived in waves. Uncle Frank and Aunt Helen, Cousin Danny with his new girlfriend, neighbors the family had known for decades, and several family friends I hadn't seen in months. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to see me, commenting on how healthy and confident I looked. "Rudolph, you look fantastic," Aunt Helen said, squeezing my arm. "Your mother mentioned you got a promotion at that marketing company." "Actually, I'm being considered for a transfer to our Seattle office," I replied, enjoying the way Mom's face paled slightly at this news. It would be a significant career advancement opportunity. I hadn't mentioned the Seattle possibility to anyone in my family, though it was true that Brennan Marketing had approached me about relocating to manage their West Coast expansion. The timing seemed perfect for a fresh start. Sarah arrived at 6:30 with Jake and several trays of food, along with Emma, who looked exactly as polished and confident as Sarah had described. Emma approached me during the cocktail hour with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Rudolph, it's so good to see you," she said, air kissing my cheek. "You look great. How have you been?" "Really well, thanks. Sarah mentioned your promotion at the pharmaceutical company." "That's fantastic." We made small talk about our jobs and living situations, and I could see her cataloging information for later use. When she mentioned how much she'd grown and changed since our relationship, I nodded enthusiastically. "That's wonderful, Emma. Personal growth is so important. I've learned a lot about myself over the past 2 years as well." During dinner, I gave a toast that Id prepared specifically for the occasion. Standing at the head of the long table, I raised my wine glass and looked around at the assembled family and friends. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate new beginnings. This year has taught me so much about the importance of truth, loyalty, and genuine family bonds. I've learned that real love means supporting each other's growth rather than trying to hold each other back." I made eye contact with Mom, Sarah, and Jake as I continued. Family means facing difficult truths together, being honest about our mistakes, and holding each other accountable when we've lost our way. Tonight feels like the perfect time for that kind of honesty and transparency. The extended family members raised their glasses enthusiastically, while the conspirators exchanged meaningful glances. They interpreted my toast as evidence that I was emotionally vulnerable and ready for their planned intervention. After dessert, as people moved between the living room and kitchen, Sarah stood up and clinked her spoon against her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "Before we get too deep into the evening," she announced, "I'd like to take a moment to address something that's been weighing on our hearts as a family." The room quieted, and I could see Emma positioning herself to record with her phone, just as Jake had mentioned during his overheard conversation. "We've been concerned about Rudolph for some time now," Sarah continued, pulling out a folder of copied documents. "As his family, we love him and want what's best for him, but we think everyone should understand what he's been going through. She began reading excerpts from my therapy notes, her voice taking on a tone of fake concern as she shared my most vulnerable moments with 30 people. Uncle Frank looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair as Sarah described my panic attacks and depression in clinical detail. "We found these records when we were cleaning out some old boxes," Mom chimed in, standing beside Sarah in a show of united concern. "We think it's important for family to support each other through mental health struggles instead of pretending they don't exist." Emma stood up next, her phone recording as she addressed the room. "I dated Rudolph during this period, and I can confirm that his behavior was very concerning. He was constantly negative, couldn't handle basic stress, and became emotionally dependent in ways that weren't healthy." The room was completely silent except for the sound of Emma's voice describing my erratic behavior and inability to cope with adult responsibilities. I watched the faces of my extended family members, seeing confusion and discomfort rather than the concerned agreement Sarah had probably expected. When Emma finished her character assassination, all eyes turned to me. Sarah, Mom, Jake, and Emma watched expectantly, phones ready to capture my breakdown for their viral video project. Instead, I stood up calmly and smiled. "Thank you all for that presentation," I said clearly. "I appreciate you sharing your concerns so publicly. Now, I'd like to share something with everyone as well." I walked to the side table and picked up my wrapped gift, carrying it back to the center of the room. "I brought a gift for our family tonight. Something I think will help everyone understand the importance of honesty and transparency in family relationships." I set the box on the coffee table and gestured for Mom to open it, since she had been the primary architect of the evening's festivities. "Go ahead, Mom. I think you'll find the contents very educational." Mom's hands shook slightly as she untied the ribbon on the wrapped box. The room remained silent, 30 family members and friends watching as she lifted the lid and peered inside. Her face went completely white, and she nearly dropped the box. "What is this?" she whispered, staring at the contents. "Family transparency," I replied calmly. "Just like you've been advocating for this evening." Sarah rushed to her mother's side and looked into the box. Her scream pierced the silence. "Oh my God, what is this?" I reached into the box and began removing items one by one, setting them on the coffee table for everyone to see. "The first item," I announced, holding up a legal document, "is a restraining order that I filed yesterday against Mom and Sarah for harassment, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Sharing someone's medical records without consent is a felony in our state." Uncle Frank stood up, his face grave. "Rudolph, what's going on here?" "I'm glad you asked, Uncle Frank. The second item should interest you particularly." I pulled out a manila folder and opened it to reveal bank statements and financial records. "These documents show that Jake has been stealing money from your construction business over the past 8 months, roughly $12,000 in client payments that were deposited into his personal account instead of the company account." Jake's face turned red, then white. "That's not true. Those are fake. I have the originals from your bank and Uncle Frank's business account. Your signatures are on the deposit slips." I handed the paperwork to Uncle Frank, who studied it with the focused attention of a man who'd built his business through careful attention to detail. "The third item," I continued, pulling out a stack of photographs, "documents Mom's affair with Mr. Patterson next door. Hotel receipts, text messages, even some interesting photographs taken in his car last Tuesday afternoon when Dad was at his bowling league." Mom sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Dad stared at the photographs in shocked silence before turning to look at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before. "The fourth item addresses Sarah's claim to be concerned about my mental health and substance use." I produced a police report and mugshot. "These are the records from Sarah's DUI arrest last November, which she hid from the family by using Dad's lawyer and paying the fine herself. Her blood alcohol level was .14, nearly twice the legal limit." Sarah lunged toward me, but Jake grabbed her arm. "How did you get those?" she screamed. "Public records, Sarah. Unlike therapy notes, criminal arrests are available to anyone who knows where to look." I reached into the box one final time and pulled out a small recording device. "The fifth item is this audio recorder, which contains every conversation you three have had about planning tonight's humiliation over the past week, including your plans to post videos of my supposed breakdown on social media for entertainment." The silence in the room was deafening. Extended family members looked between the conspirators and me with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Emma tried to salvage the situation. This doesn't change anything about his mental health issues, as clearly unstable if he has been spying on his own family. Actually, Emma, that brings us to the final item in tonight's transparency presentation. I pulled out one last folder and opened it to reveal printed screenshots and photos. These are records of your affair with my former boss at Peterson and Associates, including hotel receipts and text messages going back 6 months before you broke up with me. Emma's confident facade crumbled instantly. Those are private. So were my therapy records. But privacy didn't seem important to you 30 minutes ago. The timestamps show that you were cheating on me during the exact period when I was struggling with unemployment and depression. Your breakup message about needing space was sent 4 hours after one of your hotel visits with Richard Peterson. I turned to address the room full of stunned relatives. Emma didn't leave me because I was negative or unstable. She left me because she was having an affair with my boss and needed an excuse to justify her behavior. My depression was actually her excuse for abandoning the relationship she'd already betrayed. Uncle Frank looked up from the financial documents, his face hard with anger. Jake, these numbers are accurate. You've been stealing from me for months. I can explain, Jake started, but Uncle Frank cut him off. No explanation needed. I'll be calling the police tomorrow morning, and you're fired immediately. Dad finally found his voice. How long, Patricia? How long have you been seeing Patterson? Mom couldn't meet his eyes. It's not what it looks like. It looks like hotel receipts going back 8 months and text messages about leaving your family. Dad's voice was cold with hurt and rage. I surveyed the room, seeing justice finally being served to people who'd spent years manipulating and undermining others while hiding their own destructive behavior. The irony of tonight, I said calmly, is that you wanted to humiliate me by revealing private information about a difficult period in my life that I overcame through therapy and hard work. Instead, you've exposed yourselves as people who steal, cheat, lie, and weaponize mental health against family members. Sarah was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. We were trying to help you. No, Sarah. You were trying to hurt me because my independence and success made you uncomfortable. You resented that I'd grown beyond your ability to control and diminish me. I looked around at my extended family, many of whom were staring at the conspirators with disgust and disappointment. I want everyone here to understand something important. 2 years ago, I went through a difficult period that required professional help. I lost my job, struggled with depression, and needed to move home temporarily. Those are facts, and I'm not ashamed of them. My voice grew stronger as I continued. But I got help. I worked with a therapist. I rebuilt my career and my life. I moved forward with dignity and determination. That recovery process is something to be proud of, not something to be used as a weapon. I gestured toward the evidence spread across the coffee table. These people wanted to convince you that seeking mental health treatment was a sign of weakness or failure, but the real failure is lying, stealing, cheating, and trying to destroy other people's progress out of jealousy and spite. Uncle Frank stood up, still holding Jake's financial records. Rudolph, I owe you an apology. And Jake, you and I need to discuss this situation tomorrow morning, with my lawyer present. Aunt Helen touched my arm gently. Honey, what they did tonight was wrong. Mental health treatment isn't something to be ashamed of, and sharing those records without your permission was cruel and illegal. Other family members began expressing similar sentiments, creating a clear divide between those who supported accountability and those who had orchestrated the evening's events. My phone rang, interrupting the confrontations echoing through the room. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and I realized he must have stepped outside to call me. I answered calmly. Hi, Dad. Where the hell are you? He shouted, his voice thick with rage and alcohol. Can you guess where I am? Did the family enjoy my gift? There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice quieter. Rudolph, what you did tonight was exactly what they did to me, Dad. The only difference is that my information was true, documented, and relevant to their character. Their information was stolen medical records used to humiliate someone who'd overcome a difficult period through legitimate treatment. Dad's voice cracked through the phone. Your mother is crying. Sarah locked herself in the bathroom. Jake left without saying goodbye to anyone. And Emma, gone. Uncle Frank told her to leave after he heard about her affair with your boss. He said that kind of betrayal explained everything about tonight. I was sitting in my car outside the airport, my suitcase in the back seat, and a red-eye ticket to Seattle in my jacket pocket. The decision to accept Brennan Marketing's transfer offer had crystallized during the confrontation at the house. Dad, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight didn't start tonight. It started months ago when Mom decided to collect my private medical records. It escalated when Jake and Emma agreed to participate in publicly humiliating me for entertainment. But the way you exposed everyone was the natural consequence of their actions. They wanted transparency? They got transparency. They wanted family secrets revealed? Mission accomplished. There was silence on the line as Dad processed the events of the evening. I had no idea about your mother in Patterson. 8 months, Rudolph. While I was working overtime to pay for her spending, she was. Dad, I'm sorry you had to find out that way, but you needed to know the truth about who you're married to, just like everyone needed to know the truth about Jake's theft and Sarah's drinking and Emma's affair. Where are you now? I'm at the airport. I'm flying to Seattle tonight to start my new position on Monday. I accepted the transfer yesterday. You're leaving? Tonight. I'm leaving because staying means accepting that family loyalty requires letting people abuse me without consequences. Dr. Martinez taught me that healthy relationships require boundaries, and sometimes those boundaries mean walking away. Dad was quiet for a long moment. The family is destroyed, Rudolph. Your mother's affair, Jake's theft, Sarah's drinking problems, and now you're moving across the country. How do we come back from this? Individually, Dad. Each person in our family needs to decide whether they want to change their behavior or continue the patterns that led to tonight. You need to decide whether you can forgive Mom's affair. Mom needs to decide whether she wants to save her marriage. Sarah needs to get help for her alcohol problem. Jake needs to face legal consequences for stealing. And you, I need to build a life around people who celebrate my success instead of resenting it. People who support my mental health instead of weaponizing it. People who tell the truth instead of collecting ammunition for future psychological warfare. I could hear voices in the background, family members still arguing and processing the revelations from the evening. Uncle Frank wants to talk to you, Dad said. Put him on. Uncle Frank's voice came through the phone, steady and serious. Rudolph, I want you to know that what you did tonight took courage. Jake's been stealing from me for months, and I never would have discovered it without your investigation. I'm sorry it happened to your business, Uncle Frank. Don't apologize for exposing a thief. I'm sorry that your own family treated you the way they did. Mental health treatment is nothing to be ashamed of, and anyone who says otherwise is ignorant. Thank you for saying that. Your Aunt Helen and I want to stay in touch. We don't support what happened tonight, and we're proud of how you handled yourself. Other extended family members took turns speaking with me, expressing support for my response and disappointment in the core family's behavior. Cousin Danny apologized for not speaking up sooner when he noticed the cruel dynamic. Neighbors mentioned that they'd suspected Mom's affair for months but hadn't known how to address it. The overwhelming message was clear. The extended family had witnessed psychological abuse disguised as concern, and they recognized my response as appropriate self-defense rather than malicious retaliation. As my flight boarding was announced over the airport speakers, I reflected on Dr. Martinez's words from our final session. Recovery means protecting your progress from people who want to drag you backward. Sometimes that requires difficult choices about relationships. Tonight had required the most difficult choice of my life, but also the most necessary one. 3 months later, I was thriving in Seattle. My new position at Brennan Marketing involved developing campaigns for mental health awareness organizations, work that felt deeply meaningful given my personal experience with therapy and recovery. The Pacific Northwest's culture of outdoor activities and mental wellness perfectly matched the life I wanted to build. Dad had filed for divorce after discovering additional evidence of Mom's affair. Sarah had entered a rehabilitation program for alcohol addiction after being arrested for her second DUI. Jake was facing criminal charges for theft and had moved in with a friend while awaiting trial. Uncle Frank and Aunt Helen visited me in Seattle during the spring, expressing pride in my new life and career advancement. We hiked through Olympic National Park while they updated me on the family's continuing evolution. Your father started therapy, Aunt Helen mentioned, as we reached a scenic overlook. He said he needed to understand how the family dynamic got so toxic without him noticing. That's good, I replied honestly. Everyone involved needs professional help to change these patterns. Sarah's doing better in rehab. She called to ask for your contact information because she wants to apologize when she completes the program. I considered this carefully. I'd be willing to hear her apology, but only if it includes acknowledgement of the specific harm she caused and concrete plans for different behavior in the future. Uncle Frank nodded approvingly. That sounds like healthy boundary setting. The view from the mountaintop stretched for miles, reminding me how far I'd traveled both geographically and emotionally since that Christmas dinner conversation that had changed everything. The most important lesson I'd learned wasn't about revenge or justice, though both had played important roles in my story. The lesson was about refusing to accept psychological abuse from people who claimed to love me, even when those people were family members. Recovery from depression and anxiety had taught me that mental health required ongoing protection and maintenance. Just like physical health, psychological well-being could be damaged by toxic environments and relationships, regardless of genetic or emotional connections. My family had wanted to use my therapy experience as evidence of weakness or failure. Instead, it had become the foundation for recognizing manipulation, setting boundaries, and choosing relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. 6 months after New Year's Eve, I received a letter from Mom. She was living in a small apartment across town from Dad, working part-time and attending counseling sessions to address her pattern of deceptive behavior. The letter included a genuine apology for violating my privacy and participating in the plan to humiliate me. I realize now that I was threatened by your independence and success, she wrote. Your recovery from depression showed strength I didn't possess myself, and I resented you for growing beyond our family's dysfunction instead of celebrating your achievement. I appreciated her insight and honesty, though I wasn't ready to rebuild a relationship with her. Trust, once broken so completely, required years of consistent, different behavior to repair. The phone call that meant the most came from a stranger who'd heard about my story through Uncle Frank. A young man named Marcus, struggling with depression after losing his job, wanted advice about dealing with family members who were dismissive of his mental health treatment. My brother keeps telling me that therapy is for weak people, and I just need to toughen up, Marcus explained. But talking to a counselor is the only thing that's helping me cope with unemployment and anxiety. Your brother is wrong, I told him firmly. Therapy is for strong people who are committed to getting better instead of staying stuck. Anyone who criticizes you for seeking professional help during a difficult time is probably threatened by your willingness to grow. That conversation reminded me why I'd survived my family's attack and built a new life. Not for revenge, but to become someone who could help others avoid accepting psychological abuse disguised as family concern. Mental health treatment isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of courage, wisdom, and commitment to becoming the best version of yourself. Anyone who can't support that journey doesn't deserve a place in your life, regardless of their relationship to you. True family celebrates your growth, supports your healing, and protects your progress. Everything else is just genetics and shared history. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own mental health? How did you handle relatives who tried to use your vulnerabilities against you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content about overcoming family dysfunction and building healthier relationships. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you recognize your own strength and worth. Here is to new beginnings and the courage to choose people who truly love and support us.